Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're jumping into a 5th grade topic, reading decimals. Now, if you're new to my channel, I will put time codes in for this video in the description box below, so use that to skip ahead to whatever part of the video you think is most interesting. As always, if you have any questions about what we see today, or even your own homework, you can always visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. This video should be a rather short one, so leave a like, smash subscribe, and let's get started. In order to read a decimal number, or what I like to call decimal, all you really need to know is 2 things. You need to know how to read whole numbers, and you need to remember your decimal place value names. If you could do both of those 2 things, it shouldn't be too difficult to read a decimal number. Once again, if you can do both of these things, it shouldn't be too difficult to read a decimal number. So let's review both of these 2 things to make sure we know how to do them both. So the first thing we need to know is, do we know how to read whole numbers? So if I was to say, what is this whole number? Could you tell me what that is? Well, if you said 713, you would be correct. That's how you read this number. How about this number right here? If I was to ask you, what is this number? Could you tell me? If you said 5,291, you would be correct. Now, how about this number? If I was to give you this number, could you tell me what this is? If you said 242,860, you would be correct. So if any of these gave you an issue, and whether you have a comma there or not, you should know that's 1,000. If any of these gave you an issue, you need to make sure you know how to read your whole numbers first. So now let's move on to our decimal place value names. Now remember, we always want to start in our ones place, but unlike our whole numbers, we're going to be moving 1 to the right this time. Instead of going to the left, like we did for whole number place values, we want to go to the right. So we're going to add 1 over here to the right. Now, what is this one called? Well, if you ever have a hard time remembering our decimal place value names, they're going to be very similar to our whole number place value names. So if you recall, the very first place value to the left of the ones is called the tens place. Well, this one is going to be called the tenths place. So it looks very similar, except it has the TH there. And we're going to keep going in this same fashion. Our next one is going to be called what? Remember, for whole numbers, we went from tens to hundreds. We're going to be going from tenths to hundredths. So this is going to be called hundredths. That TH is what's different. How about another one? If we wanted another place value, what is that one going to be called? Well, for whole numbers, we went from hundred to thousands. Well, now we're going to go from hundredths to thousandths. Let's do one more. For whole numbers, we went from 1,000 to 10,000. Well, for decimals, we're going to go from thousandths to 10,000ths. So as long as you remember your whole number place values, you can easily find your decimal place values. And it's going to continue this pattern for infinity. You can have as many decimal place values as you need, and it's going to mirror what you would do for a whole number. You just got to remember to put your TH there. So now that we know how to read our whole numbers and we know our decimal place value names, let's put it all together and discuss that trick to reading our decimal numbers. Let's say we had this number here and we want to read it. Well, remember, I said there's 2 things that you need in order to read this number. You need to know how to read a whole number, and you need to know your decimal place value names. So the first thing I want you to do is, what is that number? Can you read that number ignoring everything else? What does this number say? Well, if you said 78, you'd be correct. That number, just looking at that number, says 78. Remember, reading whole numbers. That is a 78. Now we need to know, what is the last decimal place value for this number? Well, that's going to be this 8 right here. And what is the decimal place value for this 8? Well, our first one was tenth, and our second one is going to be hundredths. So this is going to be our hundredths place value. So now let's put it all together. First you read this, whatever it says there, and then you tack on at the very end your decimal place value name. So this says 78 hundredths. So that's 78 hundredths. Let's try another one. Remember, we want to be able to first read this number. What does that number tell you? Well, that number is 624. Next, we want to figure out where is the last decimal place value for our number. Well, that's going to be this 4 here. So what's the decimal place value of this 4? Well, remember the first one was tenths. The second one was hundredths. Our third one is going to be thousandths. Thousandths. So we're going to put both of these two together and we're going to get 624 thousandths. Now you may have noticed there's been no whole numbers that we've had to read here. It's always been 0. How are we supposed to read a decimal number when there's a whole number portion attached to it? Let's say we had to read this number. Well, the first thing you want to do is read that number. What does that say? 23. Perfect. So you're going to say the 23. Then you have to actually say something for this decimal. Whenever you have something that's not 0, you have to read this. And then for the decimal, you have to say and. So whatever this is, and then you're going to do the same thing you've been doing for your decimal place values. You read this number, and then you're going to say whatever the last decimal place value you have for your number. So in this case, this is 6, and this is supposed to be our tenths place. So this says 6 tenths. So putting it all together, we have 23 and 6 tenths. Let's try another one. Let's say we wanted to read this number here. First, we have to read this. What does that say? 411. Next, we have to read this as an and. Then we have to read this number here. What is that number? We have some zeros here, right? What is this number going to say? Well, don't get thrown by that number. Zeros before this number can be ignored when you're trying to just read it. That's just 99. However, what is the last decimal place value we have? That's going to be this one. And this was our 10th, 100th, 1000th, 10,000ths. So 10,000ths. So put it all together, we're going to have 411 and 99 10,000ths. Let's look at one more. This is our last one for today. Can we read this number? Well, first we read that. That's going to be our 1. We read this as and. What does this number tell us? What is this? If you said 205, you would be correct. We have zeros here, but we have another 0 here, right? But that is part of this number. We can read this number. We can't do anything with these zeros when we're reading this number. So this is just 205. Now, what is our last decimal place value? That's going to be this 5 here. And if this was our 10th, 100th, 1000th, 10,000th, what is this going to be? 100,000ths. So we put it all together, 1 and 205 100,000ths. That's going to be how you're going to read your decimal numbers. So I hope you ever follow along to these examples and hope you now know how you can read your decimal numbers. But if you have any questions about what you saw today or even your own homework, you can always visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. If you haven't done so already, remember to leave a like. It really helps the channel by letting YouTube know that you found the video helpful. And if you found the video helpful, so can someone else. So leave a like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping this helped with your homework, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney, and this has been another session of Tutor Me Sempai.